A new bill in California is aiming to overhaul recycling. The recently passed legislation would criminalize putting the well-known recycling symbol on any item that is not commonly recycled. Products would only get the chasing arrow symbol if the state can verify that most of the plastic used is actually turned into a new product. So joining us now to break this down is CBS MoneyWatch reporter Irina Ivanova. Thank you so much for joining us, Irina. So this is a really fascinating topic. I just presumed that if you had that symbol on the package that, most of the item, if not all of it, was recyclable, and that was the goal. So I put it in the little blue bin. What's driving this push behind changing the way we label recycled plastics?
Thanks, Anne-Marie. There is a growing realization of just how little plastic that we use is actually recycled. A study a few years back found that just 9% of all the plastic that humans have ever produced has been recycled. On top of that, China a couple of years ago stopped accepting most U.S. plastic imports, and that's where we were sending a lot of this plastic that we thought was going to be recycled. And then on top of that, the upheaval from COVID has the upheaval from COVID has caused a lot of local recycling programs to shut down. So we're seeing, less and less actual recycling at the same time as we're producing just as much plastic as we ever were. So there's a growing realization that something needs to be done.
So is it that, if you see that chasing arrow symbol on a product, it is recyclable, but it doesn't necessarily get recycled? Is that what the issue is?
That's exactly right. And that's simple, Anne-Marie. It is the bane of their existence for folks who work in waste management. So, for instance, something like this bread bag has a very nice recycling symbol on it. Does not mean you can put it in your recycling bin. It means it's recyclable in theory if you can find a program, say, at a local store or a specialized recycler that will collect that bag, that will, combine it with other bags, make sure they're clean, turn it into a new product. This works in theory. As you can imagine, it's a really big pain for a lot of consumers, and these programs are very small, very specialized, and don't exist in a lot of the country. So what this California bill is doing is it's saying, okay, let's just be honest about what's happening to our waste. If something is being turned into new products, it's recycled. If it's something that, you need to go to a lot of effort to recycle it and only 5% of them ever gets turned into something new, it's not going to get the recycling symbol because that is false advertising.
Okay, that's good. The truth shall set you free. That's what they say, right? So it's good to have an honest conversation about what's actually happening. Environmental Protection, the Environmental Protection Agency says actually less than 10% of all plastics are actually being recycled. That's fine. But does the bill address anything more than just restricting, what products can have the label? Like anything that might, encourage recycling?
That's a great point. This is environmentalists say this is really a first step. The first step to addressing the waste crisis is to really look honestly at how much waste there is versus how much recycling there is, because we know that consumers like to believe that things are recycled. It makes people feel better about buying plastic. There's a few things that could happen, and it depends on who you talk with. Proponents of recycling say that, honestly, labeling what gets recycled and what doesn't could create consumer pressure. So if we see, for instance, that a lot of our packaging is being landfilled, we could demand better packaging. We could demand more eco-friendly packaging. Other people say, just use less plastic. There's all kinds of issues with recycling plastic. It's economically very difficult, even when it's technically possible. It is so much cheaper to just get virgin plastic made from oil and gas than to recycle used plastic, even if it's technologically possible to recycle the used plastic. So the incentive isn't there. And then even the best circumstances, you can only recycle plastic once or twice before it becomes unusable and you have to toss it. So environmentalists, a lot of environmentalists are saying, just don't use plastic, use things like paper, use metal, use glass. These materials have been in use for a long, long time, and they're infinitely more recyclable than plastic.
I was just reading about how, thanks to COVID and the pandemic and disruptions in the supply chain, we're actually suffering from a plastic shortage here in this country. So there are a lot of items that require plastics that you wouldn't really think of, like containers for food and stuff, that are in short supply. So maybe this may trigger a trend of sort of actual reducing our use when it comes to plastic, because California isn't the only state that's taking action. What have other states done? And could we see maybe these types of changes and this type of legislation elsewhere?
That's right. Yeah, we're in crazy economic times. Maybe this is the market shift that we've been waiting for. But as you know, California is not the only state. It is the first law specifically on labeling. But earlier this year, Maine and Oregon have passed laws making packaging producers more responsible for their waste. So these types of laws are called extended producer responsibility laws. And basically they mean, if you create a lot of plastic packaging, if you create a lot of packaging, depending on what happens to it, on whether it gets recycled or reused or tossed, depending on the economic impact, you pay more for that packaging. New York State has also introduced a law similar to California's about recycling labeling. So people are definitely looking at this, realizing, something needs to happen, something needs to be done about this waste issue.
Irina, it's really, really fascinating stuff. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, if you want to read Irina's full article about California's push to revamp recycling, just head to cbsnews.com.